National Association of Elementary School Principals is proud to present the Women in Leadership podcast with Jessica Gomez and Andrea Thompson. The NAESP Center for Women in Leadership is dedicated to the strategic study of women administrators and the unique challenges that they face as educational leaders because of their gender. The work of the center is multifaceted, focusing on identifying strategies to elevate women as they pursue career opportunities, creating a strong network of women leaders, and eliminating gender bias.
Welcome to the NAESP Center for Women in Leadership podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Thompson, one of the co-fellows of the center.
And I'm Jessica Gomez, the other co-fellow.
Thank you for joining us today. Our focus will be on women telling their stories. Now, women's stories are a powerful force. Yet too often as women, we're fine talking about helping someone else, but not when it's about helping ourselves or just being ourselves. So today we are really excited to have Allyson Apsey, the proud principal of Quincey Elementary in Michigan. She'll be talking about the importance of not only owning our stories as women, but about telling our stories as women. So Allyson, welcome to the podcast. And at this time, I'd like you to share some more about yourself with the audience.
Oh, thank you so much. And Andrea and Jessica, I just have to thank you for your leadership with NAESP and supporting female leaders across the nation. So you're just so appreciated. And I am the proud principal of Quincey Elementary in Zeeland, Michigan, which is in West Michigan. This is my 8th year at Quincey. Prior to being at Quincey, I was a secondary principal at a charter school in Traverse City. This is my 19th year as a principal, and that is just like blows my mind that is where I am. So I have a lot of experience as a female leader, but I'm also an author, and I get to travel the country and speak to groups of educators. I work with an organization, a wonderful organization called Creative Leadership Solutions, and I work alongside Jessica, and we are able to work with districts on various initiatives, and that just brings us both great joy. And Jessica and I are collaborating all the time on different projects, and Andrea, like, I'm just so glad to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you, Allyson. So yeah, it's really, I love collaborating with you on all the amazing projects, and you're just such a wonderful person, and we're so happy to have you here. So, in terms of our topic for today, when women are asked to tell their stories, many women struggle with hearing negative statements such as, oh, you're bragging, or trying to be more than you are, or may it seem like we're self-promoting. In a blog post by Amanda Hirsch, she stated, it's like there's an unwritten playbook telling us to take up as little room as possible. What are your thoughts on why you think this might be?
Yeah, I can relate to this in so many ways. And this idea, it makes me think of when I first published a book, and my first book is called The Path to Serendipity. And serendipity is something I'm really passionate about searching for the beautiful lessons that we stumble upon in everything we experience, because they're there even if we can't see them in the moment. And I told a lot of my own story in my first book, The Path to Serendipity, and it felt like self-promotion or bragging to put on social media that I wrote this book. And so for me, it was a process of thinking through a couple things. One is, if I don't believe in myself and this story, who is going to? And as a woman, that's not easy to do, but it is so important. And then second, it's about the mission. It's not really about me as a person. It is about supporting others and finding those beautiful lessons and embracing life at its fullest and living our most effective lives. So if I focused on the responsibility I have to be my own advocate, and then the idea that it's really not about me, it's about this mission, those two things helped me share my story.
I love that, Allyson. You are spot on about that.
That is just beautiful. And the fact that you have experienced actually telling your stories, and that's what you do every day in books and on presentations and so on, it means that this next question is going to be really, really easy for you. Okay. So yes, so knowing how to tell your story. For some women, that's very challenging, very challenging. So because you have a wealth of experience telling your story, owning your story, what are some ways that women can tell their stories of who they are and what they're capable of?
Great question. For me, I love to write. So blogging is a way I tell my story. And that was difficult to do. Like, it was so funny because I posted my first blog in December of 2015. And I remember like closing my eyes and pressing publish on that first post and then feeling like I'm like completely exposed to the world. And right, like the world is going to read my blog. That doesn't really happen. But putting yourself out there, putting yourself out there like that is it's so daunting at first, but it gets easier step by step. And it's really empowering. I absorb a lot of ideas. Like I get tons of ideas from Jessica and from Andrea, and it feels overwhelming to just be an absorber. You have to have that balance of sharing your own genius with everyone. And whether that's through social media or whether that's through, interpersonal conversations, whatever your medium is, it's important to tell your own story because your story will be told. And if you don't tell it, somebody else will. And you want to be in charge of your story.
All the time. And, it really goes, you touched on something in terms of like the self-promotion, right? So you wrote a book. Oh, you wrote several books. Let me rephrase that. You've written several books. And part of that is putting yourself out there and saying, look, hey, check out my book, right? Check out my blog post. And, there was an article in 2017, a New York Times article where Susan Chira, the author, she wrote, women tend to be less comfortable with self-promotion and more likely to be criticized when they do grab the spotlight. With that said, what are some tips that you can offer our audience about overcoming this negative perception, especially since you've lived it and you are a very public figure? How do you get past that?
Yeah, I don't think you do entirely. And so to have that as your goal might be too lofty of a dream. I don't think like that whole concept of being a little bit uncomfortable with self-promotion ever truly goes away, but it fades as you have more experience with putting your ideas and putting yourself out there. And it's so funny because I used to put blogs or tweets or whatever information out there, and then if it didn't get any attention, I would think, oh, like that was dumb, Allyson. And now it's more about curiosity. Like I'm wondering what ideas will resonate with people. And so when I put information out there via blog or tweet or whatever kind of medium I do, when it doesn't get a lot of attention, I'm like, either the way I presented it or that concept in itself isn't really resonating with others in the way it's resonating with me right now. And that's okay. It's just information. It's not any reflection of who I am or the value I offer the world. And again, just coming back to, it's about sharing ideas. It's about connecting through inspiration. It's not about me as an individual. It's about moving all of us forward. And so I take and I try to give.
Yeah, love that. You're again 100% spot on, Allyson.
Yes, Allyson, you're so brave. Because and all the emotions that you mentioned having gone through by putting yourself out there, I feel them also when I put myself out there. So it's good to hear that you felt that way, but you pushed through. Which is kind of what we do with imposter syndrome, but we'll talk about that another time. So Allyson, so you've talked about why it can be challenging for us as women to tell our stories. Now, and we want to encourage as many women as possible not to shy away from promoting themselves. This is why we're having this talk right here.
Yes.
Now, what would you say to women as to what are the benefits of actually sharing their stories and how this aligns with building their confidence? So what are the benefits of sharing their stories and how does that align with women building confidence?
So it's such a great question. I look at my blog as kind of like a digital portfolio. George Couros is the one who inspired me to blog in the first place. And that's what he calls it. And I look at it as an opportunity to reflect and grow, but also share the story of who I am and to hold myself accountable for what I believe in. If I put it out there in something I believe in a blog, I like integrity is really important to me. So I better be living that every day. And, maybe not every minute of every day, but the overall story of me as a real person needs to be reflected in that blog. So it's reflection, it's like interpersonal growth, it's also accountability. And then the other benefit is sharing my story and being able to be the creator of my own story.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah. And lots of things come from that, right? When you do have control of your story, people get to know what you want them to know about you, the true you, as opposed to what others interpret you as being or assume that you are. And so for a woman who says, okay, so yes, I hear all the benefits of it. Yes, I got to push through that self-doubt that we're bragging or we're doing some self-promotion. What are some ideas that maybe you can give our listeners how to start? Because you mentioned social media, you've mentioned blogging, you've mentioned books, but for someone who has not done any of that, where might they start?
Okay, so my first piece of advice is Google yourself and find out what story unfolds when you Google yourself. And if the story is nothing, there's some information. If the story is, some news articles from 20 years back, there's some information. Are people able to figure out who you are by Googling you? And that would be just a great place to start, because if not, what could you put out there that would tell your own story? Or can you create a website for yourself or a blog? But there's so many different ways of sharing our stories. And I think it's incumbent upon us to use a digital platform because that's how we get our information. If we ignore that digital platform, we ignore that opportunity to share our stories. So whether it's teachers pay teachers that you want to share, or Pinterest or Instagram or Facebook, or I don't know, TikTok or whatever new thing's going to come out next. Just choose a way to just to share your story and allow others to get to know you in the same way that you mentioned, Jessica, that authentic information that you want out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you shared so many nuggets of wisdom today, nuggets such as where to start, how to push through, telling why you would want to share your own story. And we all have stories to tell. Andrea, you have an amazing story. We all have amazing stories to tell. Yeah. But as women, the sad thing is for us all is that we're often afraid to tell them. Right? That's fear. I mean, that's what so much of what we do sometimes. It's that fear. But, the stories, as you were talking, the stories are what honor our professional contributions, right? Those gifts and talents that we have, we need to put them out there. They're expressions of our talents, of our commitments, of who we are as individuals. It could be just professional, it could be personal, it could be a combination of both. And so, when I think about this, the words that we use and the stories we tell truly do shape our world, both on a professional and on a personal level. And I think to myself, if we're quiet about it, we really do limit the impact and the influence in this world. And so as we try to work here in the center, we're trying to find ways to not stay quiet anymore. And by having people like you on our show is just another way as to how we can share our stories and amplify the voices of so many of our amazing female leaders out there. And I just want us to leave reminding us all that let's go out there. Let's go tell the world all the positive, the powerful stories of our lives, and not to be afraid to do what you do, Allyson, to not be afraid to do what you do, Andrea. You know, this morning I was telling Andrea, thank you for being so honest when things are not up to par, when things are not up to our caliber of how we want our story to be told. Thank you for being honest and speaking up. And I learned from her, right, by having that courage to be able to do that. So Andrea, thank you for that. And Allyson, thank you so much for being part of my life and for being who you are, and continue to tell your story. And for everyone listening, start somewhere. Start somewhere. What would you leave our listeners with, Allyson?
The other thing that you, Andrea and Jessica, share so well is that there is room for success for all of us. And so we do not need to fear someone else's success. There is enough space out there for all of us to be successful.
Yes, indeed.
And there is the mic drop. So with that, thank you so much, Allyson, for taking time to talk with us today. And we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening. You can find out more about NAESP and the Center for Women in Leadership at naesp.org.